Namaste. Amen and blessed be. So this Sunday, Glenn Pascal and I are offering the sermon as a dialogue. He didn't just decide to find a different seat. We've shared the task of discussing mercy as it concerns God and as it concerns our everyday behavior. And I'm glad to have a conversation partner to tackle a sort of slippery topic of mercy. It certainly helped bring out some of the detail and nuance of the topic. Now, the centering thought you may have noticed, I know at least a couple of you did, notice it last week, from Joyce Meyer, telling us that mercy is the stuff you give people that don't deserve it. Mercy is the stuff you give people that don't deserve it. There are a couple of key pieces there. Mercy is something that's not deserved. It's not morally required or even a reflection of justice. Mercy is a free gift. Now, the second important piece to notice is that there is a power differential where mercy is concerned. There's something that one party wants or needs, and the other party has it. Mercy is the stuff that you give people that don't deserve it. That all sounds a little bit rudimentary. We generally know what the word mercy means, so why are we spending a whole month on it? It's because mercy is the linchpin of universalism. You know, the Unitarian Universalism that we are a part of. Historically, universalism is a belief that God wouldn't punish anyone eternally for sins that they committed. And it took root in America as this tidal wave of fire and brimstone theology swept across the country. In brave opposition to an angry, vengeful God, our predecessors thought, no, actually we think God is pretty loving. And no loving God would condemn souls to eternal punishment. Universalists believe that God is merciful. Today, I hear a couple of pretty big misunderstandings of universalism. One misunderstanding is that universal salvation is a sort of moral relativism. It says, yeah, I know I sin, and you sin too, and I'm sure it will all work itself out in the end, and who's to judge anyway? Universalism was a Christian tradition that clearly understood that God was the judge of our actions, and our actions have moral weight. Just because our fate is all tied up together doesn't mean that what we do as individuals is any less important. Now, the other major misunderstanding of universalism is that we're too good to be judged and punished. I don't want to split hairs, but that's actually our Unitarian predecessors that believed in the inherent worth and dignity. Our Universalists were far less optimistic about humanity. Universalists recognized the frailty of human character and recognized that God must be merciful in judgment of such imperfect creatures. So you see, mercy is really the linchpin of universalism, then and now. Today in our universalism, we believe that our fate is all tied up together, that no one gets left behind. And therefore, what we do matters. It matters a whole lot. We have the great fortune to live in this amazing world, and this opportunity was a mercy that we didn't earn and will never be able to pay back. The best we can do is to be grateful and try to be merciful with our neighbors.
Each week we affirm that we are a diverse congregation. As a middle-of-the-road believer, I see within this diversity comfortable atheists who find science and reason a worldview that works. For them, Evidence of God's existence has never met an adequate standard of proof. God talk is gibberish, and any meaning it might contain is not worth the effort. I also find among us uncomfortable atheists, unable to reconcile injustice and suffering in the world with a God worth believing in. Any God who would allow such things is a God who cannot earn our respect. So why believe at all? Human hardships arise from three sources: natural disasters, physical disabilities, and man's inhumanity to man. Each level raises the question, is this a case against God? Believers have a response in each case, but it is unlikely to sway atheists. One basis for disbelief in God is the suffering, dislocation, and death brought about by natural disasters, ironically given the name acts of God. We're in hurricane season, and we also know that there was a huge earthquake in Nepal. The philosopher Voltaire was moved to atheism by the great Lisbon earthquake of 1755. Tens of thousands of people died, and his most famous book, Candide, was a satire against believing this is the best of all possible worlds. An omnipotent God could correct the situation, but did not, suggesting God didn't exist or was uncaring, and thus not worth believing in. The environmentalism of our time, and climate change in particular, are giving us a new perspective on natural disasters as acts of God. We are coming to respect Earth as a reality that operates independent of the human race under its own set of laws. What goes by the wayside in this new perspective is the biblical notion that God gave mankind dominion over the earth. Yes, we are the dominant species, but we now see that Earth has the last word. Continuance of the planet is far more certain than our own presence upon it. If we want to stay here, we must show respect for nature and meet nature halfway. That doesn't sound so bad. It might even be a moral and spiritual advance for humanity. It's worth noting that religious fundamentalists chronically overinterpret natural disasters. Human history is filled with earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods and drought, paralyzing cold and enervating heat. This confirms not the end of days, but repeated phenomena. Today there is a possible end of days brought about not by an act of God, but by climate change, resulting from our own actions and calling on us for a higher level of response. Another aspect of suffering as a case against God arises from bodily infirmities, especially genetic disabilities and chronic disease. A Jewish friend of mine is a maternal and child health doctor whose atheism arose from his experience with birth defects. He attends University Unitarian Church in Seattle and regularly lobbies me to become a non-believer. The 2nd century Jewish sage Hillel once saw a skull floating in the water. He said to it, "Because you drowned others, you were drowned, and in the end those who drowned you will themselves be drowned. Our deeds fashion our destiny. Heaven and hell are in our own hands." Such notions of retribution are difficult to apply to physical disabilities inherited at birth or epidemic diseases affecting thousands or millions. Both a genetic lottery and a mass event seem unjust given the lack of individual responsibility. Perhaps there is no compelling case responding to atheism based on this form of suffering, yet a well-known piece of religious history relates in a strange way. The healing miracles of Jesus have been dismissed by the liberal Jesus Project as inauthentic, but other biblical scholars believe Jesus' healings are more provable than his sayings. Jesus' miracles involved genetic defects that caused epilepsy and crippling, and epidemic illnesses that placed victims at death's door. Biblical stories suggest the cure came from the divine energy in Jesus' laying on of hands. What if this meant not faith in Jesus personally, but faith in the basic goodness of the world, faith that evil, while real, might be overcome? When a cripple suddenly able to walk thanked Jesus, he was told, "You walk because of your faith." Today, huge medical strides are in the works relieving physical suffering from genetic illness and chronic disease, and the theological beauty in such advances is that they are seen by atheists as validation of science and by believers as the dispensation from a generous God. And so it goes.
Now, taking seriously the profound challenges of life, the pain and struggle, has raised some very good questions about the nature or the existence of God. It also raises some important questions about the nature of you and me. God is not the only one who can respond to suffering in our world, after all. Each one of us has countless opportunities every day to bestow mercy or to withhold it. Though we often forget it, we have a lot of things that would make a big difference for someone else in need. We have spare money. It may be a few cents for some of us. It may be a few $100s for others of us. Money that we could part with easily. Most of us have physical abilities that could help someone less able. And we have the right to vote, which many of our neighbors in Orange County don't have. Though we forget about it, we have the things that other people's want and need. We have the power to bestow mercy. And often the thing that's most wanted in life is a kind word or a moment of compassion. And that's something that each one of us could give, even to someone who may not deserve it. The things that our neighbors most long for, especially here in South Orange County, company and kindness, cost us nothing to give. Mercy is ours to give away freely. We tend to forget that until someone asks us directly. Now, the reading from earlier came from a person who was forced to choose between offering mercy or not on a regular basis. People came to the door asking for help. Now, it's more likely in our lives that we run across someone on the sidewalk asking for money, or perhaps on the median as we drive by. So what arises in you when you encounter a person begging for money? For me, there's an awkwardness because there's really no right answer of what to do. One voice inside my head says this person will use this money for drugs or alcohol. And that voice is exactly as loud as the other voice that says a few dollars won't make any difference to you. And if you can't be kind as a Unitarian minister, this world is pretty messed up. Two equally loud voices disagreeing with each other in my mind. There's no right answer, just confusion. And the other feeling that usually arises is a combination of guilt and shame, especially when I haven't had this sort of encounter for some time. I feel a level of shame because suddenly, right before my eyes, I'm confronted with the power that I have in the world. Suddenly, I'm forced to realize that I could easily show mercy to other human beings with virtually no cost to myself. It's an incredibly uncomfortable feeling. I'm beginning to realize that mercy is a strangely tall order It's just as difficult as compassion or justice or forgiveness. It's difficult because having mercy involves the terrifying recognition that we have the power to make a difference in the world. We have the power to make someone else's life better, even if momentarily, if we choose to. Mercy is something that we give to those who don't deserve it, without obligation, without reason, sometimes even risking our own personal safety. Some people answer the call to give mercy anyway. In a cynical world that gives thousands of reasons not to, mercy is their human response.
A more extreme level of this issue is man's inhumanity to man, which suggests moral evil. Atheists see in this a case against God. Believers note that every great wisdom tradition teaches identical values and virtues, beginning with compassion. God-oriented voices have advocated living and acting in ways that do not bring harm to others. These voices are eloquent and on the record over countless centuries. Only human perversity, not God, can be blamed for ignoring them. Atheists respond by citing acts of inhumanity too severe to reconcile with any notion of God. The Holocaust is an unsurpassed example. I began as a believer in my teenage years and became an atheist in my 20s as the record of the death camps unfolded. This drew me to the existentialists. Their most charitable view of God is that he created the universe and then walked away. Jean-Paul Sartre served in the French resistance against the Nazis. He's the most famous of the existentialists. And he said, quote, "We have been taught to take evil seriously. The death camps demonstrated to us that evil is not an appearance, that knowing its cause does not dispel it, that it is not opposed to good as a confused idea is to a clear one, that it is not the effect of passions which might be cured, or of a fear that might be overcome, or of an ignorance which might be enlightened. Evil can in no way be diverted, reduced, brought back, and incorporated into idealistic humanism." Sartre concludes, "We were situated in such a way in World War II that every lived moment seemed to us like something irreducible. Therefore, in spite of ourselves, we came to this conclusion, which will seem shocking to lofty souls. Evil cannot be redeemed." Sartre's words will always resonate for me as a warning not to wish away evil, let alone blame the victims. If there's a saving grace in the worst situations, God alone knows what it is. Any human attempt to play God in this regard can only lead to the kind of twisted reasoning that Sartre deconstructs. My return to a belief in God began through an unlikely route, the writings of Jewish existentialists. Foremost was Viktor Frankl's book, From Death Camp to Existentialism. It testified to man's ability to learn from the most extreme experience. And then there was Martin Buber. He recorded how the Holocaust strengthened the Jewish identity of survivors and removed a prevailing fear that Judaism would disappear into secular society. A few years ago, I was moderating an interfaith panel, and a question came from the audience about the Holocaust. So I directed it to the rabbi on the panel. His reply, "The Holocaust tells me of what I am capable." This remarkable generosity of spirit put matters in a radically different light. The ability of Jewish witnesses to find transformative value in the worst inhumanity forced me to ask if the Holocaust was a clincher case against God. My belief was not fully restored at that point, but the basis of my unbelief had been shaken.
One of our greatest challenges with regard to mercy is to find it for those who seem really, really not to deserve it. Sometimes remembering the first principle, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person, seems nearly impossible. Coming into contact with profound moral evil is fortunately rare, but it does happen sometimes, and it's jarring. Recently, one of our members served on jury duty. A lot of us have served on juries before, but this jury was called to decide on a particularly horrifying murder case here in Orange County. The victims were randomly targeted young people, and the perpetrator, who had a history of criminal behavior, expressed no remorse for his actions. He didn't seem to care that he had shot two perfectly innocent young people riding their bicycles in the middle of the day. Now, the Tapestry member I'm speaking of was visibly distraught by the experience. She had spent 2 weeks listening to graphic details of the crime and hearing a lack of remorse from the perpetrator, and finally deciding on his fate. It was a profound test of our first principle: respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and it put the question of mercy to the test. After talking for a little bit, we agreed that we were relieved that this individual had been sent to jail for a long time. And we were also relieved that he would not be put to death. While society clearly needed to be protected from a dangerous person, the role of the criminal justice system is not to exact revenge. It's to keep us all safe as possible. Mercy was granted, even though something in the Tapestry member's gut and my own gut after hearing this story hungered for something a little different. Just a little bit of revenge. It was hard to respect the inherent worth and dignity of an unapologetic murderer. Sometimes we have to have faith, though, as Unitarian Universalists. We have to have faith in what we know in our hearts when we're at our healthiest and strongest and with people that we love. We have to have faith that the sense of mercy that calls us to action persists, even in more challenging times. Sometimes it doesn't always feel comfortable or even right to extend mercy. And we have to have faith that even when the clouds rumble in, there is a deeper truth. Our faith as Unitarian Universalists leads us repeatedly back to mercy. Not necessarily forgiveness, but mercy for another human being.
What returned me to a belief in God, both real and worthy, was neither rational judgment nor blind faith. Instead, it was a series of paranormal experiences shared by many people. These included an out-of-body experience, a voice from the beyond experience, a taken to the other side experience, a telepathic experience, and a precognitive experience related by a friend. Such experiences remind me of the limits of my knowledge about what is real, and they make me realize I have a choice between two attitudes. One attitude is to dismiss as coincidences and hallucinations things that might in fact be real. The other attitude is to express gratitude for things that may turn out to be chance or delusion. I can only say that I choose gratitude. I have come to realize that personal temperament, not proof, may be a crucial determinant of atheism or belief. I feel the need to express gratitude toward some source of beneficial events in my life. Others do not feel that need, or they may have few things to be grateful for. I feel sorry they have no cause for such feelings, just as they regret that I have a need to express such feelings. Appreciation for variations in temperament as well as variations in belief is an invaluable part of the Unitarian Universalist creed of accepting differences while affirming our oneness in shared humanity.
Amen. I'd like to